Perfect. My blog. Try to get Larry. He's gonna target. Text it to Joe. So you flip Chris off. That'd be bad. I know.
You waiting for me?
He's always waiting for you. Hi everyone, welcome to our session. My name's Randy. This is my colleague Joe, and we work for Cisco, and we do incident response. We do product security incident response with BayThreat. You might be familiar with them. We're the group that creates all the security advisories for Cisco product security vulnerability. We also do incident response for our customers. And what we're going to cover today is just some of the trends we're seeing in the incident response situations we've been in with our customers over the last year. We came to BayThreat last year at the bar. By the way, the bar was very cool, just saying. And we talked a little bit about what we'd seen previously, which had been mostly denial of service. And we're seeing a definite shift in the incidents that our customers are dealing with. Denial of service definitely still out there, but it's definitely not the bright and shiny object that everyone had been chasing just a year ago, and things have now shifted towards more of a persistent threat where the miscreants, the adversaries, pick your buzzword for the bad guys, are they're getting into customers' networks, they're burrowing in deep, they're moving laterally through the network, they're harvesting credentials, and they move on to other goodies, and we're going to talk about what we've been seeing. So just our agenda, we're going to talk briefly about what we've seen when we're out working with our customers, and then we're going to talk about how we can use the capabilities of our network to respond to these attacks, understand what's going on, identify them, and then remediate and hopefully kick the bad guys off our networks until the next batch shows up. So we have access to a lot of data. We have many different opt-in data sets that our customers are gracious enough to help us with. You might be familiar with some of these. We have IronPort, our own IPS product, ScanSafe, now SourceFire, yay, and some others as well. And I'm sure this is just a recap for all of you, but things are grim out there, let's say. Most of the organizations that we work with have either been owned or they are communicating with known sources of maliciousness. Whether or not they're owned or not, the communications are still ongoing. For the next bullet, we sort of toyed as an industrialization of 0 days or weaponization, but 0 days are right now a big industry in the underground. What Krebs just did an article about, there's over 100 0 days every day in play. And we know some of the nation states are hoarding these for whatever's coming down the road, but we also know that there's a very large industry around adversary use of these, and they're very targeted uses. It's not spray the stuff everywhere anymore. It's target the vertical, the company specifically, the individuals we want to go after, use a 0 day against them, get on their network. It's very hard to defend against those. So also operational network realities. most of us are just worried about keeping the network up and running. And since, these new persistent threats, there's not a lot of network impact to those. With denial of service, the network was down, it was a fire drill, everyone was on board to fix the problem. Now the network's up, things are working, it looks good at a high level. So it's a lot harder for people to prioritize this where it should be because they've got a lot of other things going on that they need to do to keep the network up and running. And also, traditional event correlation is very challenging for these types of attacks. We got an IPS at the edge, we got a firewall, everything's sort of focused on keeping the bad guys out. Well, in a lot of cases, we're letting the bad guys in, and we don't have a lot of good instrumentation looking at how the adversaries are then communicating back out to their command and control or whatever it is where they're coordinating their activities. And there's all sorts of stuff being stolen. I mean, look at the news recently. Was it over 2 million accounts recently? Many government entities have had information stolen. There's just a lot in play right now. Thank you. So some of the findings we have from the customers that we've worked with, there's a lot of U.S. organizations that are talking to Iran and Cuba. Why you may be concerned about that is those are embargoed countries if you're a U.S. entity. You should not be communicating with them. We just found that to be very interesting. Most of the people that we've been working with, they don't really have the capability in place to track where specifically their users are going out and communicating with, and they're very interested in this particular finding. Also, every one of the customers that we've worked with, they've been communicating with sites that are high threat. They've been hosting malware. They're actively involved in spam campaigns. There's all sorts of bad stuff going on. And every one of the customers that we've been working with, they've been in communication with these. Also, there's a lot of people who are also communicating with .mil and .gov sites, even though there is no business legitimate reason for them to be doing that. What looks like is happening is that these organizations are being used as jumping off points for attacks deeper into .mil and .gov. And also, almost everyone is in communication with sites that have no content. So these are either command and control sites, for malware, or they're sites that have been parked and had been either serving malware or will be in the future. And also, a lot of them are surfing porn. We find if you're looking for a list of good porn sites, we've seen lots of them out there. And I don't know how this works with the acceptable use policy, but I'm pretty sure that's not for legitimate business purposes.
So that's 50% by the number of companies, not by volume.
Yeah, the volume's pretty huge, but only in 50% of the customers. Other good things too, gambling sites, just other wackiness that, we all go to Amazon every once in a while, but in some places it's a whole lot more than that.
What, just me? I thought that was you.
Unleash your network.
Oh, okay. So next we're going to talk about how you can utilize your infrastructure and various sources, a couple of sources of telemetry on what we can do to monitor the behaviors of the network itself and the users and devices that are contained within it. So what we're going to talk about is the inside-out view. So as Randy had mentioned, we've been looking at from the outside in, and now we're wanting to understand, what are our users communicating with? What websites are they connecting to? What IP addresses are they sending data out to? So we have reputational security meets big data and DNS. So when we think of DNS, and we'll talk about this here in a second, it's just a background service. I go to a name, it connects me to a specific resource. How can we utilize DNS as well as another source of telemetry we'll call NetFlow? Other vendors have other sources. Juniper has SFlow, and other vendors have, they call it different names. But why correlate just one? We can correlate various other threat feeds. We can correlate 10, 20, 30 different pieces of sources, but the key piece with that is being able to understand the confidence within these certain sources of threat feeds that we have and being able to weight those. Earlier, Dennis talked about, you can have, Dennis, I don't know if anyone had listened to the Open DNS talk that we started off with, but you have certain threat feeds. Not all those threat feeds are going to be of high confidence and provide efficacy as to whether something's truly bad. So we need to correlate 10, 20, 30, and weight those based on the confidence of the source that we're receiving that information from. So DNS, just a quick overview of what DNS is. DNS is a scalable distributed architecture. As Dennis mentioned, the criminals are using this to their advantage. If it's up and operational and I can use a toss-away domain, why not use it to my advantage? Shift from one IP address to another IP address if I'm using DNS fast flux. So what is it? It has resource records. Resource records are pieces of information that say if I'm going to, example.net, there's the IP address or the IPv6 address. Do I need to check for another resource? Then I can check and do a resolution against that specific name server. So it's more like a phone book. I can do a lookup and it provides me a phone number. In this case, I'm doing a lookup of a name and it provides me an IP address. Just a quick overview of what it looks like. So DNS is a background service. How many actual network operators do we have in the room? A handful. How many of you monitor DNS? So a few. So it's very valuable as a passive DNS that we can monitor what our users are querying for and what responses are being provided back. And what we'll talk about is that how we can overlay DNS on top of NetFlow, because NetFlow is based on IP address, it's not based on name. So it can actually provide information of what other users are communicating with a specific resource. Does that make sense? So this is just a quick overview of some DNS monitoring that we have in place. In this case, what we have is that we have just the most common type of query types. So we have A, quad A, NE, CNAME. And what we have is we have a baseline overview. And if once, as a network operator, you need to ensure that you're baselining the type of network traffic that's on your network. If you don't, how do you know when you have a deviation between that? Well, in this case, if we look here with the A queries, we have a common, valleys, we have hills, but we have also spikes. And this is over a multi-month period. We can actually observe and understand, where are there certain trends with certain types of query types. In this case, do we have a bunch of compromised endpoints that are then looking for some certain records? And then we have both the A, and then we have the NE queries where we have the spikes. And this was used using GraphBot, which is just a graphing tool to provide metrics as an input. On A? Yeah, right after the big spike, there's a bit. It could have, yeah. Yeah, I did just pulling this over a multi, yeah. So, but I mean, the concept here is understanding, the trending in the baseline. And then if you see, you have a trend and then you have spikes with both the A's and the NE queries. So utilizing DNS, we can also use DNS firewalls or DNS sinkholes. Is everyone familiar with this concept? Yes? No? Crassy is? So what we're using is that we have our primary DNS servers. And as part of our primary DNS servers, we're looking at these as recursive resolvers. Our endpoints are assigned DNS servers internally, and they connect to those whenever they do a lookup. Well, as part of that, if we have RPZ, Response Policy Zone, that ISC developed, or some other DNS firewalling service, we can actually make ourselves authoritative for malicious domains. And as part of that, we can say, well, if you look up maliciousdomain.net, I can point you to a sinkhole address. I can point you to a quarantine website. I can listen on any port or any service and understand what type of telemetry that device, once it's been compromised by whatever malware it may be, what ports it's going to communicate with and listen and provide stimulus and responses back. So does that make sense on utilizing the network to provide additional sources of telemetry and what's happening? Yes?
It knows where it goes for DNS, and then from there, you're able to use that, the victim, and see what happens after, right?
So the concept here is that if you have a device within your sinkhole, so you have kind of two options here. You can do, I'm going to send you a loopback address. if my response from my DNS firewall is going to be a loopback, then you're going to go nowhere. There's going to be no network traffic generated by that endpoint. However, if I give you an address that's within a sinkhole and I listen on all ports, I can understand what type of additional ports that device is communicating on when it's actually trying to connect to that domain. Does that help? Okay. Any other questions? So traceback and attribution. So traceback is working back through the network to understand, what is the actual source of the compromised endpoint, and how can we do this? Well, a lot of networks right now, it makes it a little bit hard, but we actually have a usable source of telemetry, NetFlow, that provides us, the source of traffic. So we can overlay, NetFlow on top of DNS, but we have NAT. Well, if we're post-NAT, what do we get? We get a /24 or a small range. We do not know what the actual true source is. DHCP, VPN IP pools. So we have a user that connects into my VPN gateway. It gets an IP address. Well, it disconnects. Another user connects in. Gets the same IP address. So traffic could appear to be malicious from one endpoint that's been compromised, but the other it's not. So we can utilize this, NetFlow, to provide source attribution of the compromised endpoints that are communicating with no malicious domains. So NetFlow is very similar to what we refer to as a phone book. It's like a phone bill. It provides the source party, the destination party. So we have a source address, destination address. We have the protocol, and we also have the ports it's using to communicate between these two parties, as well as the duration of that connection itself. So it's not micro-analytical. This is not a wiretap. This is not providing packet capture or payload level information. It's very high level. But it can provide attribution of what the source is and who they're communicating with. If we overlay DNS on top of NetFlow, we can understand what queue names, what FQDNs specific sources within our network are communicating with. So if we overlay all the DNS domains for Facebook on top of NetFlow, then I can understand how many users are connecting to Facebook websites. That makes sense? So we look at this. We have a multi-sensor network of devices sitting within your infrastructure. You can enable NetFlow. Once you've enabled NetFlow, you can export that data off to network collectors. Once you have the information exported off to network collectors, then you can perform your analytics and overlay DNS on top of it. Quick overviews on how to enable it. On an interface within a Cisco device, other products are going to be different. It's one command. How to export it, just a single one-liner. And what's very interesting and very cool about this is that you're able to get anywhere between 20 to 50 flow records for one exported packet. So if we compare that to other things where we see syslog may generate just one packet for one flow. We're able to collect multiple records for a single exported packet. So on this, we have just a quick output of what the onboard flow cache looks like. And then here are some commands that can be done on the devices itself. This command?
The output.
Yeah, this is just the output on the device.
Cisco
device.
Not Linux.
Not Linux. Once you've exported it off, you can run other commands that are very similar. Just depends on what utility you're using. So these are some other on-device commands that you can issue. There's other based on the actual utility that's being used to collect the data.
So plug for our workshop this afternoon. We've got a lab in one of the Cisco campuses that we can get access to, and we'll be doing either a demonstration or we'll let you actually do some hands-on using NetFlow and some other techniques to identify attacks and then to react to them. So it'll be after lunch. We're in room 6. If you're interested, come on by. So we've talked about it's pretty grim out there, but there are some things we can do with our network. There's information we can get on NetFlow, out of DNS to help us to understand the threat, identify what's going on, identify machines that have been compromised, hopefully remediate them. We try to put this in a framework that people can get their hands around, and we use a 6-phase incident response model. And we've got some, we call them actionable recommendations. At a high level, they look pretty cool, but the devil's absolutely in the details. But it's things that we hope that y'all can use to react to these threats or prepare your network so that when the threat occurs, and it will, since it's very, unfortunately, easy right now for the miscreants to get a toehold in a network, but there are absolutely things we can do to then respond to them once they're in it. So the 6-phase response we have, and we'll walk through all 6 of these: preparation, identification, classification, traceback, reaction, postmortem, and unfortunately it keeps spinning around and around and around. So preparation, this is definitely the hardest part, and call it the 80% effort part of the thing. It's technical, it's non-technical. How many of you have a dedicated security team? Excellent. How many of you are the security team? Excellent. How many of you have a pickup team that just sort of responds to things as help desk calls come in? So understand there's, it runs the gamut, from, a company like ours that has, dedicated, investigators that, react to problems as we identify them, to, you're the IT support, you're the help desk, you're the security person, you're all of it. We're hoping that there's something here for everyone, though. There's a lot of best practices that we can leverage to help us prepare and then respond to incidents. Unfortunately, most of us find ourselves in a situation where the attack is underway, things are happening, the miscreants on our network. That's not the time to be implementing best practices. It's best to get ahead of the problem so that when it does occur, you're ready to go. Know the enemy. This one's gotten harder lately. There's a whole lot of enemies out there, and they're getting really good at deciding who their victim is, identifying people or teams within that victim that they can go after. They mine Facebook, they're out there on Twitter, they're all over your LinkedIn accounts. They find things that are very compelling to you, and they find a way to leverage a 0-day against that person. We know security people, pretty savvy people that have been compromised because the miscreants are getting really good at camouflaging and making the information they're using compelling. We would very much like to, even if it's a team of one, have a security person dedicated, or if not dedicated, at least y'all know who to call if there's a security problem. Have some policies and procedures in place that you could follow, and then get some tools ready. So how many of you run NetFlow? You, okay. How many, we talked about DNS, we talked about there's a few of you out there that are mining DNS or tracking your DNS usage. Do you log it though? All right, how many of you look at the logs? Because we know all sorts of people, they log all day long. They